On the morning of my wife's funeral, her employer called me and said 6 words that turned my blood to ice. Henry, you are not safe. He didn't offer condolences. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't explain. He just said, come to my office immediately. Do not tell your son. Do not tell his wife. If they know what I know, you may not live through the night. The words hit like a warning, cold and final, leaving no room for questions. Subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I am 74 years old. I have buried friends, co-workers, and men I served beside decades ago. I thought I understood grief. I thought I understood loss. But nothing prepared me for the moment I realized my wife didn't simply die. She was taken. But before I tell you what was waiting for me in that office, you need to understand how the day I buried my wife became the day my own son declared war on me. My name is Henry Caldwell. For 42 years, I worked maintenance and logistics for the City Transit Authority. Before that, I wore a uniform overseas and learned how to stay calm when everything around me was chaos. I learned how to watch hands. I learned how to read eyes. I learned how to know when someone was about to do something they could never undo. Those instincts never leave you. They just go quiet until the storm arrives. The storm walked into New Hope Missionary Church at 10:43 the humid Tuesday morning. I was seated in the front pew, hands folded around my cane, staring at the polished walnut casket holding my wife, Margaret. 47 years of marriage reduced to a box. White lilies on top, the smell of polish and flowers heavy in the air. Margaret was small, soft-spoken, the kind of woman people overlooked. For 35 years, she worked as executive house manager and personal aide to Leonard Whitmore, a man whose wealth made newspapers whisper and politicians answer their phones. To the world, she was the help. To him, she was the only person he trusted. She ran his life, his finances, his schedule, his secrets, and she never once brought that world home. At home, she clipped coupons. She reused tea bags. She folded dollar bills into neat stacks and hid them in envelopes labeled groceries, church, emergencies. That was my Margaret. The organ music hummed low as the sanctuary filled. Neighbors, choir members, a few of Mr. Whitmore's staff. Everyone spoke in hushed tones. Everyone except the 2 empty seats beside me. My son Caleb and his wife Vanessa were late. Not a few minutes late. 40 minutes late. The service had already begun when the heavy doors at the back of the church slammed open. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I heard Vanessa's heels first underscore sharp, fast, echoing off stone like gunshots in a library. Heads turned. Whispers spread. The air shifted. Then came the smell. Expensive perfume layered over cigarette smoke and impatience. Caleb dropped into the pew beside me, wearing a bright sand-colored suit that belonged in a nightclub, not a funeral. No black tie. No somber look. He didn't touch my arm. Didn't nod toward the casket. He pulled out his phone. The glow lit his face in the dim sanctuary as his thumbs flew across the screen. Sweat dotted his forehead underscore, not the sweat of grief. The sweat of a man under pressure. Vanessa slid in next to him, oversized sunglasses still on, lips pursed like she'd walked into a place beneath her. Her dress was too tight, too short, too loud for mourning. She leaned toward Caleb and whispered underscore, not quietly. Is it always this hot in here? Don't they believe in air conditioning? I felt my grip tighten on my cane. Margaret's favorite hymns played. The pastor spoke of kindness, humility, service. Caleb didn't look up once. At the repast, the church ladies laid out food Margaret loved. Fried chicken, slow-cooked greens, baked macaroni with real cheese, cornbread wrapped in foil to keep it warm. Vanessa held her paper plate like it was contaminated. She leaned close to Caleb. I wear hearing aids. I hear more than people think. I can't believe we're eating this, she hissed. This is so greasy. Where did all her money go? You said she had savings. Caleb shrugged, chewing. She spent it on prescriptions, he muttered. At least that's over now. Vanessa laughed. A small, sharp sound. That's almost $800 a month back. My wife wasn't even buried yet, and they were celebrating the savings. Something cold settled in my chest underscore not grief. Recognition. When the room finally cleared, Caleb approached me. No sympathy, no offer to drive me home. He stood over me and said, "Where's Mom's lockbox key?" I looked up slowly. "What did you say?" "The key," he repeated. "Vanessa says there's insurance paperwork and investments. We need to secure it before things get messy." Vanessa crossed her arms. "Probate gets ugly fast. We're just trying to help." I stood, leaning on my cane. "She's not even cold," I said quietly, "and you're already dividing her." Caleb's eyes hardened. "You don't understand finances, Dad. You fix pipes. Mom handled money. Let's handle it." I laughed once. No humor in it. "There is nothing for you today." His jaw clenched. "You have until tonight," he whispered, "or I'll make sure you don't keep that house." And that's when my phone buzzed. Leonard Whitmore. And that's when everything changed. The phone vibrated again in my hand before I could answer it. I stepped away from the fellowship hall, past the folding chairs and half-empty trays of food, into a quiet hallway where sunlight spilled through stained glass and painted the floor in bruised colors. I pressed the phone to my ear. "Mr. Whitmore," I said. "Henry," he replied underscore, and that alone told me something was wrong. Leonard Whitmore never used first names unless the walls were closing in. "I'm at my private office," he said. "I opened the safe Margaret kept here. I found something she never showed me." My stomach tightened. "A ledger," he continued, "and a recording." I leaned against the wall, my knees suddenly unsure. A recording of what? There was a pause underscore long enough for dread to bloom. "Henry," he said quietly, "your wife didn't die naturally." The world tilted. I closed my eyes, breathing through my nose the way I'd been trained decades earlier when panic got men killed. "What are you saying?" I asked. "I'm saying," Whitmore replied, "that if your son or his wife learns what Margaret documented, you won't survive the night." The hallway felt too small. "I need you to come here now," he continued. "Use the service entrance. Do not go home. Do not tell Caleb. Do not tell Vanessa. And Henry, bring whatever you need to protect yourself." The call ended. I stood there listening to the dial tone like it was a death sentence. I walked back into the hall and told Caleb I needed to speak to the pastor about final expenses. It was a lie, but lies were the only language my son understood anymore. I stepped outside into the thick summer heat and climbed in my 1994 Chevy pickup, rust creeping along the fenders, engine still strong. The cab smelled like old leather, motor oil, and the pipe tobacco I quit years ago. I reached into the glove compartment. Wrapped in an oil-stained cloth was my service revolver. I checked the cylinder. Loaded. I wasn't a widower anymore. I was a man entering hostile territory. Whitmore's estate sat beyond wrought iron gates in the northern hills underscore land so manicured it didn't feel real. When a security camera turned toward my truck, I gave my name. The gate opened silently. I drove past hedges taller than houses, fountains that whispered money, and parked beside a sleek black sedan worth more than my home. The contrast didn't make me feel small. It made me alert. Whitmore was waiting at the door in a wheelchair, his body frail, his eyes sharp enough to cut glass. "Henry," he said. We didn't shake hands. We clasped forearms. "I'm sorry about Margaret," he said. "She was the finest mind I ever worked with." He wheeled inside, motioning for me to follow. We passed through halls lined with portraits of men who never cleaned their own messes. The house felt hollow without Margaret's presence. Whitmore stopped at a heavy oak door. Inside his private study, the curtains were drawn. The room smelled of cedar and old books. And we weren't alone. A man stood near the fireplace underscore tall, worn, eyes like someone who had stared into too many dark places. "This is Evan Cross," Whitmore said, "private investigator. Margaret hired him 2 months ago." My heart skipped. "She never told me." "She didn't want to frighten you," Cross said. "But she was frightened herself." Whitmore gestured to the desk. On it sat a black leather journal I recognized instantly. Margaret's. Next to it underscore a thick envelope stuffed with photographs. "Open it," Whitmore said. My hands trembled as I picked up the journal. The leather was soft from years of use. I opened to the last marked page. Her handwriting was neat, but the ink wavered. "Caleb asked for money again." I said no. His eyes scared me. I swallowed. "I found pills in his jacket. They look like mine, but they aren't. I think he's switching them." The room spun. Cross slid the envelope toward me. Look at the photos. They spilled across the desk. Caleb in an alley, handing cash to a tattooed man. Caleb and Vanessa in a car, laughing, champagne bottle raised. And then the last one. My kitchen, time-stamped 3 nights before Margaret died. Caleb stood at the counter, 2 prescription bottles in his hand. He was pouring pills from one into the other, smiling. She was murdered, I whispered. Whitmore leaned forward. She was executed. I stood so fast the chair toppled backward. I'll kill him, I said, my voice breaking free of restraint. I'll end this myself. No, Whitmore snapped. Cross stepped between me and the door. If you kill him, Cross said, you lose everything. Prison, house, evidence. And Vanessa walks free with the money. What do I do? I demanded. Whitmore's eyes were cold. You go back, he said. You play the grieving old man. You let them believe they've won, and we let them destroy themselves. I looked down at Margaret's journal. I straightened my jacket. I can do that, I said. The drive back felt longer than it should have. Every red light stretched. Every turn felt wrong. I kept checking my mirrors out of instinct, half expecting Caleb's car to appear behind me, half hoping it wouldn't. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my jaw ached from how hard I was clenching it. I wasn't driving toward my house. I was driving toward a battlefield. The porch light was on when I pulled into the driveway. Margaret never left it on during the day. That was the first sign. The second was the front door. It wasn't closed all the way, just slightly open, like a mouth left hanging after a blow. I shut off the engine and sat there for a moment, listening. The cicadas buzzed in the trees. Somewhere down the block, a lawnmower coughed to life. Normal sounds. A normal neighborhood. Nothing about what waited inside was normal. I stepped onto the porch, my cane tapping softly against the boards. I nudged the door open with my shoulder, and the sound hit me first. A ripping sound. Wet. Violent. Like fabric being torn with purpose. I stepped inside. The living room looked like it had been attacked by an animal. Couch cushions split open, white stuffing spilling across the floor like snow. Drawers yanked out and dumped. Bookshelves stripped bare. And in the center of it all was Vanessa. On her knees, hair wild, holding a yellow box cutter. She was slicing through Margaret's favorite sofa, the one we saved for 3 years to buy. She plunged her hands inside the cushions, tearing them apart, breathing hard like she was digging for air. Where is it? She muttered. Where did the old witch hide it? She didn't see me. She was too deep in the hunt. I felt something inside me crack, but I didn't move. Not yet. A new sound rose from down the hallway. A mechanical whine, high-pitched, relentless. A drill. My stomach dropped. I followed the sound past crooked picture frames and the shattered glass of our wedding photo lying face down on the floor. The drill screamed louder as I reached the bedroom. Our bedroom. I pushed the door open. Caleb was drenched in sweat. His expensive suit jacket lay discarded on the floor, his tie loosened, his face twisted with obsession. He had a heavy-duty power drill pressed against the wall, safe hidden behind Margaret's painting of the Last Supper. The painting was tossed aside like trash. Smoke rose as metal screamed against metal. Come on, he growled. Open. He leaned his full weight into it, not looking for memories, not looking for documents, looking for money. I let my cane slip from my hand. It hit the floor with a sharp crack. The drill screeched sideways, gouging the wall. Caleb spun around. For half a second, he didn't recognize me. Then his eyes locked onto mine. It's empty, he shouted, hysteria breaking through. There's nothing in here. Nothing. Where is it? I leaned against the door frame, letting my shoulders sag, letting confusion cloud my face. I don't understand, I murmured. He crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed my jacket, slamming me back against the frame. You knew, he snarled. You and her were hiding things from me. He picked up the drill again and revved it inches from my face. Tell me where she put the money. This was the moment Whitmore warned me about. The moment where fear stopped pretending to be greed. I let my knees buckle. I clutched my chest and slid down the wall, gasping, my breathing ragged and uneven. Caleb froze. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, feathers clinging to her dress. Don't let him die, she screamed. If he dies now, we lose everything. Caleb cursed and dropped the drill. He knelt beside me, shaking me violently. "Wake up," he shouted. "You don't get to die yet." I whispered, barely audible. "The trust." His grip tightened. "What trust?" I forced the words out. "Margaret, set up. More than 4 million. Lawyer. Next week." The lie hung in the air like bait. Caleb's face transformed. Panic gave way to hope. Vanessa smiled. They hauled me onto the bed. Not gently, not cruelly, underscore carefully. Like something fragile they needed intact. Caleb took my phone. "You won't need this," he said. The lock clicked. The door shut. And I was alone. 2 days passed. They fed me moldy bread and lukewarm water. Vanessa slid the plates across the floor with her foot. I ate, not because I was weak, because soldiers don't starve when they're planning survival. At night, I listened through the vents. I heard Caleb pacing. I heard phone calls whispered in panic. I heard one name repeated, over and over. I waited until the house slept. Then I reached under the bed and pried loose the floorboard Margaret insisted on installing years ago. Inside lay my salvation, a spare phone, and a revolver. I sent one message. Then I waited. The house never truly slept after that. It only went quiet in the way predators do, underscore still, listening, waiting. I sat in the armchair by the bedroom window, watching the moon crawl across the floorboards like a slow interrogation light. My body ached from the floor, from the hunger, from the weight of pretending to be weak. But my mind was sharp, sharper than it had been in years. Fear does that to you. It strips everything down to what matters. Sometime after midnight, I heard Caleb's voice through the vent. Low, strained, begging. "No, Marco, listen to me," he whispered. "I have it handled. The money is coming. It's a trust. Medium." There was a long pause. I imagined the voice on the other end. Calm, patient, dangerous. Caleb swallowed hard. "I just need a few more days," he said. "Please, don't send anyone. I swear on my life." Another pause. His voice cracked. 500,000 is a lot of cash to move at once. That was when I understood. This wasn't just greed. It was survival. My son wasn't chasing luxury. He was running from men who didn't accept excuses. The lock clicked the next morning. Vanessa stood in the doorway holding a coffee mug that said "World's Best Grandpa." Her smile was stretched thin. "Morning, Dad," she chirped. "You need to look sharp today." Caleb appeared behind her, freshly shaved, tied too tight. "The lawyer's coming," he said. "You just need to cooperate." They walked me to the living room like handlers guiding a sedated animal. The man waiting for us was Harold Brenner, estate attorney. Steel gray hair, cold eyes, briefcase worth more than my truck. He laid out the trust details calmly. Total assets, just over $5 million. Everything transferred to me. But there was a clause. Competency. If I fail medical clearance, the funds would be frozen for a decade. Vanessa opened her mouth. "He's been forgetting things," she said quickly. "Talking to people who aren't there." Brenner snapped the folder shut. "In that case, the trust locks immediately." Caleb panicked. "No," he blurted. "He's fine. He's sharp." Brenner studied me. "I'll schedule an evaluation," he said. "Tomorrow morning." When the door closed behind him, Caleb's smile vanished. "You're going to pass," he said quietly. "One way or another." That night, Vanessa cooked. The smell of pot roast filled the kitchen. She hummed. I watched her reflection in the window. I saw her slip a white packet into my soup. I knocked the bowl over. It shattered. Their bulldog lunged, licked, collapsed, died. The silence afterward was absolute. Caleb wouldn't look at me. The next morning, he drove me not to a hospital, but to a crumbling clinic by the industrial park. The doctor held a syringe. Too full, too clear. I grabbed his wrist. "Sheriff Patterson is on his way," I whispered. The syringe hit the floor. We were thrown out. Caleb's patience snapped. "Tonight," he hissed. "You sign." Back home, a for sale sign stood in my lawn. Vanessa was showing the house, selling my life while I was still breathing. I ruined the deal. She lunged at me. Caleb slapped her. The sun went down. The shotgun came out. Night fell heavy over the house, pressing down on it like a lid. The air inside smelled of cheap whiskey, bleach, and fear. Caleb sat in the living room in my old recliner underscore, the one Margaret loved because it faced the window. Resting across his lap was a 12-gauge shotgun he'd bought years ago and never properly cleaned. He ran an oily rag along the barrel over and over, slow and deliberate, like he was trying to convince himself this was real. Tiffany_no, Vanessa_ moved through the dining room with cardboard boxes and packing tape. Rip. Press. Rip. She wasn't packing clothes. She was packing silverware. Electronics. Paintings Margaret had collected from flea markets and church fundraisers. She worked quickly, efficiently, like a woman preparing to abandon a sinking ship. I sat on the edge of the bed in the darkened bedroom, my door open just enough to see the hallway light. I could hear Caleb's breathing from across the house. Fast, uneven. He wasn't pretending anymore. His phone rang. He stared at it for a full 3 seconds before answering. I heard the voice through the thin walls, _calm, measured, terrifyingly patient. Caleb's voice broke immediately. "I told you it's coming," he said. "Tomorrow at the latest." A pause, then a sound I had never heard from my son before. A whimper. "Please," he said. "Not my legs." The line went dead. Caleb stood up. The shotgun came with him. I felt the shift before I heard his footsteps. Slow, heavy, decided. The bedroom door exploded open, slamming against the wall hard enough to crack plaster. Caleb stood there, silhouetted by the hallway light, shotgun leveled at my chest. In his other hand was a crumpled document. Power of attorney. "Sign it," he rasped. "Now." He stepped closer. The barrel smelled of old oil and rust. "If you don't sign," he said, "I'll make it look like you couldn't live without her." I didn't reach for the pen. I looked at my son, really looked at him. "You killed your mother," I said quietly. His face twitched. "Shut up. I know about the pills," I continued. "I know you switched them." Something broke behind his eyes. He started pacing. "She was selfish," he shouted. "She was sitting on millions while I was drowning. She said she was cutting me off. She said she'd give it to charity." He stopped and pointed the gun at me again. "I didn't poison her," he insisted. "I just adjusted things. If she'd been stronger, she would have survived." I listened. Every word. He threw the paper onto the bed. "Sign." I picked up the pen, but I didn't write my name. I wrote 4 words. "I know what you did." He leaned to read them. Confusion. Then terror. He raised the gun, and then _. The front door shattered. Lights flooded the hallway. "Police! Drop the weapon." Caleb grabbed me, dragged me into the open as a shield. I felt his heart pounding against my back. He screamed demands. I waited. He blinked. And that was enough. I dropped my weight, drove my elbow back, twisted the barrel, felt bones snap. The shotgun hit the floor. I stood over him as officers swarmed. I didn't pull the trigger. I didn't need to. The police station smelled like disinfectant and old regret. I sat in a small observation room, hands folded over my cane, staring through the one-way glass at my son. Caleb sat shackled to a metal table, his wrists cuffed, his right hand wrapped in a splint where I'd broken his finger. The expensive suit was gone. The confidence was gone. What remained was a man stripped down to panic and lies. He leaned forward, talking fast, trying to outrun the truth. "It was a heart attack," he insisted for the 3rd time. "She was sick. Everyone knew that. I loved my mother." The detective across from him didn't argue. He just listened. That silence was heavier than shouting. The door behind me opened softly. I didn't turn. I already knew who it was. "Mr. Caldwell," said Harold Brenner, his voice low and precise. "May I come in?" He carried no briefcase this time. Only my old spare phone, the one from beneath the floorboard. Caleb looked up as Brenner entered the interrogation room. Confusion flickered across his face, then irritation. "I want my lawyer," Caleb snapped. Brenner didn't respond. He placed the phone on the metal table. "Press play." My voice filled the room, _calm, steady. "Why did you kill your mother, Caleb?" There was silence. Then Caleb's voice, raw and unguarded. "Because she was hoarding money. Million. She watched me drown and told me to be responsible." He swallowed on the recording. I switched the beta blockers for stimulants. It wasn't poison. If she'd been stronger, she would have survived. The sound of his own confession echoed back at him. Caleb's face drained of color. He stared at the phone like it was alive. "No," he whispered. That's not under, sir. Brenner stopped the recording. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Caleb slumped forward, his forehead hitting the table with a dull thud. The lie had collapsed under its own weight. Detective Morales stepped into the observation room with a file tucked under his arm. "We got Vanessa," he said quietly. I closed my eyes. She folded fast. Morales continued. "Identity theft. Forged checks. Credit cards in your wife's name." And she admitted something else. I looked up. "She tested the powder on the dog," he said. "She said Caleb called it a rehearsal." My stomach clenched. Morales hesitated. "There's one more thing," he said. "To make the murder charge airtight, we need toxicology. That means exhumation." The word landed heavy. I thought of Margaret in the ground. The quiet. The peace she deserved. I also thought of the way she must have felt when her heart began racing. When fear replaced trust. "Do it," I said. The sky was gray the morning they brought her back up. I stood beside the grave, leaning on my cane, listening to machinery tear into the earth I had begged to keep closed just days earlier. Whitmore sat beside me in his wheelchair, silent. They took her to the medical examiner. Hours passed. When Detective Morales returned, his face told me everything. "Massive stimulant presence," he said. 10 times the safe limit. It was murder. The case was sealed. By sunset, the charges were filed. First-degree murder. Conspiracy. Elder abuse. Fraud. Vanessa screamed when they read hers. Caleb didn't. He just stared at the floor. The truth had finally outlived the lie. They show my son on the evening news that night. Orange jumpsuit. Shackles at the ankles. His head shaved, his eyes hollowed out like something had already taken his soul before the courts ever could. He looked smaller than I remembered. Smaller than the boy I once carried on my shoulders. Vanessa walked behind him, sobbing into her hands, mascara streaked down her face. She didn't look at the cameras. She didn't have the courage for that. Her designer life had ended in a single afternoon. The anchor said the words slowly, carefully, like they were afraid of their weight. First-degree murder. Conspiracy. Elder abuse. I turned the television off before they finished. Justice had spoken. It didn't need an audience. I sat alone in the precinct waiting room long after the paperwork was done. The adrenaline had burned away, leaving only exhaustion and silence. The kind of silence that settles after a storm has ripped everything familiar from the ground. I was a widower. I was childless. I was free. Solomon Brenner found me there, holding a thick envelope. "There's still the matter of your wife's estate," he said gently. I laughed once. "Dry. Burn it," I said. "Give it away. I don't want money that smells like poison." He shook his head and handed me the envelope anyway. "She anticipated that response," he said. "Read this first." Inside was a handwritten letter. Margaret's handwriting. Steady. Deliberate. "My dearest Henry, if you're reading this, then I was right to be afraid and right to trust you to finish what I could not." She wrote about the money, about how she earned it quietly, patiently over decades, about how she hid it not out of deceit, but out of fear that greed would destroy what little peace we had left. Then she wrote the line that broke me. "If our son has fallen this far, do not let my work become his reward. Let it become his reckoning." Below the letter was the will. Caleb received $1. Vanessa received nothing. Everything else underscore, just over $6 million underscore, was mine. I sold the house on Elm Street. Not because I needed the money, because I couldn't breathe inside those walls anymore. I sold the furniture, the car, the dishes, every object that carried a memory of fear or betrayal. And then I did the one thing Margaret would have smiled at. I gave the money purpose. The Margaret Caldwell Foundation opened 6 months later. We paid for legal defense for seniors being exploited by their families. We funded investigations. We helped people escape homes that had become prisons. In the first year alone, we stopped 9 cases of financial abuse. Every victory felt like a conversation with my wife. Every life saved felt like justice multiplied. I visited my son once. Just once. I slid his inheritance through the metal tray. $1. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just said, "This is all greed ever leaves behind." And I walked away. 1 year later, I stood on a riverboat in Paris, the city Margaret dreamed of but never reached. The air smelled of wine and water and freedom. I scattered her ashes into the current and whispered, "You're safe now." And for the first time in a very long time, so was I. People ask me if I miss my son. They ask it softly, carefully, the way you ask about a wound you're afraid might still be bleeding. I tell them the truth. I miss the boy he used to be. I miss the child who used to run to the door when I came home from work, who held the flashlight while I fixed a sink, who fell asleep in the back seat with his mouth open and his shoes kicked off. That boy is gone. The man who replaced him is someone I don't recognize underscore and someone I am no longer responsible for protecting. Blood does not excuse betrayal. It only makes it more unforgivable. For a long time, I blamed myself. I asked where I went wrong. I replayed every argument, every time I said yes when I should have said no. Every time I mistook entitlement for immaturity. Every time I believed love alone could fix a character flaw. That kind of guilt is a trap. It keeps good people chained to bad behavior long after the damage is done. Margaret understood that before I did. She saw the danger growing quietly in our own home while I was still hoping things would turn around. She was braver than me. I live smaller now. A modest apartment. My old truck. Morning walks. Coffee with men who know what silence means. I don't need much. What I needed was peace. And peace only came when I stopped protecting someone who would never protect me. The foundation keeps me busy. Every week, I meet people who remind me how close I came to becoming another quiet statistic underscore, another elderly man labeled confused, isolated, drained, and discarded by the very people who should have loved him most. Some stories end in courtrooms. Some don't. But every one of them begins the same way. With excuses. With silence. With someone telling themselves, it's still my child. It's still my family. Abuse doesn't stop being abuse because it shares your last name. If you take nothing else from my story, take this. Love does not require self-destruction. Loyalty does not mean surrender. And family does not get a free pass to hurt you just because you share history. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do underscore for yourself, and for them underscore, is to let consequences speak where words have failed. Margaret once told me something I didn't understand until it was almost too late. She said, "Some people mistake access for entitlement. And when you finally close the door, they call it cruelty." She was right. Closing the door saved my life. If you're watching this and something in your chest feels tight underscore, pay attention to that. If someone in your life makes you feel afraid, small, or expendable, don't explain it away. And if you're older and you feel like the world has started talking over you instead of to you, hear me clearly. You're not weak. You are not irrelevant. And you're not obligated to be anyone's sacrifice. If justice mattered to you in this story, let me know. If you've lived through something similar, you're not alone. And if this message reached you at the right moment underscore, that's not an accident. Sometimes the story you need finds you exactly when you're ready to hear it.